Hello, everybody. My story, very normal people, BNP, as we say. So, welcome back in our show. And you know that we always bring very normal people with very extraordinary stories and sometimes with extraordinary books or ideas that maybe you have never heard before. And today we have a writer as well. His name is Steven, and he will introduce himself. Welcome, Steven, to our show.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much. Very pleasure to be here with you. My story is semi-normal, I guess. It's kind of unusual. Born in the United States, educated in the United States, but I've spent almost my entire adult life outside the United States, and over half my life. I lived in Asia for 21 years, worked for four different multinational organizations before I started my own business. Then I moved to Australia, spent 12 years in Australia. I did move back to the United States for a few years to look after my father. He had some health issues before he passed on, and I was his primary health caregiver. And now, believe it or not, I'm coming to you from Mexico City. So kind of an unusual, but kind of a normal story.
You said it correct. Semi. so, so you have written two books, right?
I've actually written 22 books, but
Sorry,
yeah.
sorry. I said
It's
two.
okay.
Yeah, 22. Yeah. Okay. So, can you please tell us about your books? How does it? I say, how do you start it, and what is one of the most, let's say, important books that can be nowadays that we're talking
Well, I think thank you for that. The I have a formula for writing, and I actually coach other writers using this formula, and it's
about?
what I call a four by four matrix. Then this is for nonfiction. I don't write fiction. My father was a fiction writer, but for nonfiction, I tell people come up with what are your four main messages,
Mhm.
and then underneath that, four key messages that support that. So, for instance, if I was writing a book about people leadership, I'm one might have to do with delegating, and then what are the four key aspects of delegating that you want to talk about? Another might be feedback, how to give effective feedback, and what are the four key elements of that? And with that four by four matrix, you have 16 chapters. And now it won't end up that way, but this is a good for me and for the writers I've worked with over the last few years. This is a good way to get started, get your thoughts together, set up 16 little file folders and keep throwing your notes in and quotations and whatever you want to use on those 16 topics. And it comes close. Sometimes the book ends up 14 chapters, sometimes it ends up 17, but like I said, it's a good way to get started.
Mhm. So, you have written a book about leadership, and I would like to talk about that today with you to discuss a little bit. So, what did what was something that pushed you to write about leaders and leadership?
No, that's an outstanding question because, I was during the pandemic, I noticed it, and I coach leaders and I mentor leaders, but I noticed that leadership was changing and the need for leadership was changing dramatically. I mean, on a global basis, we saw some very strong, great leaders, particularly in places like New Zealand, who handled the pandemic very well. And we saw leaders in other countries that, well, let's say they didn't do such a great job. And I was thinking about how leadership is changing and how the need for human connection has changed because of the pandemic. And I started thinking that leaders, to be successful coming out of the pandemic, need to be more human. And so I created a word, and the name of the book is called Humony Leadership. It's a made up word. It's not in the dictionary yet. I hope someday it will be. But humany combines humanity, and harmony. And so I want to emphasize the need for leading of people. You don't lead resources, you don't lead workers, you don't lead staff. You lead human beings, you lead people. And the need for leaders coming out of the pandemic to create workplaces of wellness and harmony. And that's a unique concept. Not many people talk about harmony in the workplace, but I think that's something we need to work towards.
Mhm. So, you said that you saw something that is needed extra, let's say, in a leader, right? So
Yes.
what do you think it was missing in the leadership, let's say, in especially in the time of Corona and after that, because let's say Corona time, it was like a I, I can't find the word to express that, but many things changed.
Yeah.
Many things have changed. So please,
Many
yeah.
many things change, and I think things. I honestly think things were changing before coronavirus. I think they went on hypersonic speed
Mhm,
because of the pandemic. They escalated. Um, the I think one of the things that has changed, and we're seeing this through the Great Resignation. We're seeing this with the quiet quitting trends that we've seen, but we have to, as leaders, we have to stop treating employees only as a means to an end. We can't be results focused only. That mindset is contributing to really millions of people around the world have quit their jobs or seeking new employment with organizations that value them as human beings. So I think that's the key thing that's changed is we need to value people as human beings. And the second thing that changed, I think this is hopefully the silver lining of the
mhm,
pandemic. Before we used to talk about work life balance and we
mhm,
say, oh, yeah, people have a life outside work. And yeah, that's fine if they do it on Sundays or Saturday afternoons, as long as they work their 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week. Well,
mhm,
that's not acceptable for people these days. So I think we have learned, hopefully, or at least starting to learn, is that we understand that people have responsibilities
mhm,
outside work, not just a life. And so those responsibilities might be caring for aged parents or for
mhm,
children, or even if they're working in their local communities, Habitat for Humanity, building houses, or
mhm,
Meals on Wheels, whatever they're doing, those for the individuals, they consider those responsibilities. Those are not pastimes. Those are not hobbies. And so we have to respect that as leaders now and understand that people have responsibilities and we need to be flexible and adaptable to how they handle their work responsibilities as well as their outside work responsibilities.
mhm. So when you speak about leadership, let's say it's more uh, in the workplace or also in general.
Both. One of the reasons I wrote the book the way I wrote it is that it's designed for everyone, whether you're a first time supervisor or team leader on up to an entrepreneur or CEO. My definition of leadership is very simple. If you lead people, you're a leader. And even if you don't lead people, quite frankly, you have to lead yourself. So even as what we call independent or individual contributors, um, they can still benefit from the book and from this thinking. It's a new mindset about leadership.
Mhm. So according to you, what do you think will be the best say features, let's say, for a leader to have?
I think number one for a leader for themselves, for the leader to be successful,
Mhm,
is a growth mindset, continuous learning. I've coached over 10,000 leaders over the last 25 years. And
mhm,
yet every month I still read 30 to 40 articles on leadership. Every year I read six, maybe seven books on leadership, plus
mhm,
try and write one or two. Um, I think it's this, you have to constantly be learning. And that would be number one. And also to demonstrate that to your people. I
mhm,
think the second thing is, and this is, it goes back to my core philosophy of leadership, is that managing people is a 1980s construct. Um,
mhm,
it's no longer applicable in today's world. It's no longer relevant. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to be managed by my boss. And even more so, nobody says, I can't wait to be micromanaged by my boss. So the philosophy, my leadership philosophy in the book is very simple. You manage things, you manage policies, processes, procedures, but
mhm,
you lead people.
mhm,
And that to me, if you can use that mindset in the workplace, in an organization, in a nonprofit, in government,
mhm,
you coach children's sports teams.
mhm.
Remember that you're leading people. Take that manager's hat off and lead people.
Right. So it came a question when you were talking about before 80s and after 80s. Do you think that uh, to lead people, let's say from 90s plus or whatever the latest, from 2000 plus up to now. And before that, it was easier to lead people, or people it was easier to be leaded, or how do you see that?
I
Hmm?
think it was easy to be a leader, and I promise you, and I say this in the book,
Hmm.
um, that if you're over 40 years old or over 45 years old, this mindset's going to be difficult because look, you've been very successful as a leader, but with that philosophy of control, command and control, or do it my way or the highway. But you have to realize that, in the last 20, 30 years, we're now hiring people for their brains, not just for their hands. When I first started, 40 years ago or whatever in the
Hmm.
workplace, whatever my boss said was gold. It was the rule. You didn't question it. You just did it. Well, today we're hiring people, and people want to know the reason behind things. They want to understand the rationale for why we're doing things a certain way, and they want to be involved. They want to use their brains. They don't want to just go and execute somebody else's
Hmm.
plans. I think that's number one.
Hmm.
The second biggest change, Arthur, I would suggest to you is that, and I coach people on this all the time now because I see it
Yes.
too often. A leader comes into a new group
Hmm.
and says, "This is how you earn my trust." Well,
Hmm.
again, that doesn't work in today's workplace. You have to start your relationship with trust. You should come in, and I would say, come into the group and say, I trust you. I trust you're going to do your best to the best you can. This is how you can lose my trust. You lie to me. You hide an error. You don't come to me, for instance, when you know this is beyond your capabilities, and you don't come to me to help me, let me help you. That's how you can lose my trust. But you start your relations based on trust. Don't walk in like the old 1980s leader and says, I'm the leader. I know everything. I'm the best. And this is how you have to earn my trust. Who
Hmm.
wants to work for that person?
Okay.
Not very many.
So it means what I see is like, okay, what you used to say first, now you have to say it last. And what
Yeah.
you used to say last, now you have to say first. In the first day of meeting somebody, you say, oh, I trust in you, man.
Yeah.
You don't know what
Yeah.
you're gonna do to me,
Oh,
but I
see,
trust in you,
if
And
you're
it's
over
like,
40, that's going to feel uncomfortable.
but I
I'm
understand
not,
what you mean. It's like there are some people
but
that they can understand it better way.
absolutely, absolutely. But you know what? Most people, look, there's always going to be the 4%, 5%, 6% of people who want to screw around, who goof off, who don't do the job. But do you want to focus your energy on those 4, 5, 6%, or do you want to focus your energy on the 94, 95, 96% of people who will do their job? And this is like, it irks me when companies started monitoring the keystrokes of people working from home. Wait a second. If you've hired somebody and you can't trust them enough that you have to monitor keys, you have to monitor how much time they're on the computer, you want to monitor how long they take a bathroom break or a lunch break or walk their dog. I'm sorry. You're not going to be successful going forward. Very few people want to work for you if that's your attitude.
So, sorry, to speak about leaders, there is a lot, huh? But still, we have to let's say that we'll try to say some main things, and for this time. So, for every time we know that we need different leaders, right? So, uh, what kind of leaders we need at this time that we're living?
I think we need people centric leaders. I mean, I'm not saying people over profits. People over profits is kind of an either or situation. We either focus on our people or we make money. No, it's both. But if we focus on our people, if we empower them, if we listen to them, if we reduce anxiety and stress in the workplace for them, then they're going to contribute and they're going to give us their best and they'll be loyal. I mean, Gallup has done research for years, which shows less than 30% of the workforce is engaged at any particular point in time. So only 1/3 of our workers are engaged. Well, try doing something different. The old ways are not working. Get people involved. Get people engaged. Um, I said to a guy the other day that I was coaching, and he was complaining because he's had like 5 resignations. It's the beginning of the year, and people quit their jobs or start new jobs in the beginning of the year. And I said, well, look, it's your fault. It's the way you've been leading your people, and you cannot grow your business when one of your main priorities is replacing lost workers. If you got to spend, and I told him, I said, you're going to spend the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks replacing those lost workers. How are you going to grow your business? And he said, I can't. And I said, well, now learn from that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, what would you say to somebody who says that, okay, or better to say, okay, because you know that the famous expression, they say, uh, do you believe in people, in leaders, they are born or they become?
I love that, Arthur. I almost want to hear your thoughts first, and
Yeah,
I'll
no,
share
no, no,
mine.
no, no. It's my show. I make the question. I have the
Darn,
questions. Next
darn.
time we can discuss a
I,
lot because I like that too. You know.
Yeah, I think leadership is learned, and sometimes it's learned from just situations. I mean, you can be in a situation and you do something and you learn that you either did it right or you did it wrong. If you did it wrong, you learn from it. I think very few leaders are born in today's world.
Mm.
There might be a few. There's always the exception. I mean, it's kind of like you know, somebody born as a great writer? Well, some people maybe, whatever their background, their DNA, their genes, maybe they become great writers, but other people have to work on it as a craft. I think leadership is a craft, it's a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I've trained 10,000 people the last few years, so I have to believe I can help people learn how to be better leaders.
So when somebody comes to you and say, you know, I think I'm gonna be a good leader, or I think I was born to be a leader. So how do you start, let's say, the first discussion with him? You know, how do you approach him? You know, to make him trust you.
um, I would probably start with that person, his or her communication skills. And, you know, people, when you talk about communicating, they think about great orators and, who gives great speeches or who can motivate people or rah, rah, rah type stuff. Well, yeah, that's kind of important. But, the two key skills of communicating are listening and asking good questions. And so if I'm working with someone like that, one of the tests I would put them through, or if I'm observing them, is I would focus on observing their listening skills and their questioning skills. Do they jump to conclusions? Do they ask good questions? And most importantly, do they ask good follow-up questions? So when somebody says something, they're not getting what's on the front of their brain or the top of the iceberg, but you're getting a little bit deeper. Because, as we know, people often tell leaders what they think the leader wants to hear. And so I have people practice this simple 3-word phrase, tell me more. So, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more. Please tell me more. And get below the surface. And so I would start, if I had to start with somebody brand new, I start with their communication skills.
Okay. And what is going to be the last thing that you're going to say after he has been with you for the time that you are training him? The last, let's say, the last words that you have to say to him.
The last words. Here's a swimming pool. Jump in. No.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. But yeah, please just answer the question.
Now, I think if I finished somebody or had a conversation with somebody, or sometimes I finish my a speech with these words, and it simply says, "I'd like you to contemplate how are you going to continue to learn, not what, but how. It's not what you learn, but how you can continue to learn, and how dedicated are you to learning. In other words, it's just something you're going to do once in a while, or you're actually going to devote time to it. I mean, the people I work with, after 6, 7, 8 months or so, I start having them put in their calendars an hour every 2 weeks as learning time, just as a minimum. And that's time they have to block off, no meetings, no one can interrupt them. And then when I see them the next meeting, I say, what did you learn? What did you do during that, what I call the focus hour? What did you do during your focus hour? What have you been learning lately? So I think that would be my final thoughts. And that's my final thoughts to your audience. What are you going to learn and how are you going to learn it?
Okay, it's a very good one. what you're going to say between, I'll let the audience to contact you, and so you can help them to be good leaders.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Well, LinkedIn number one. I mean, you can find me, Stephen Howard.
Mhm.
I think it's Greater Los Angeles area. Um, Stephen at Humony leadership.com is my email address. So Humony, Humony, leadership.com. So Stephen with a V and an N. So
So I'll make it
email
easier. You
me.
just send it to me, so I'll just
Okay.
write them down in the description of
Okay.
the video, so people can contact you whenever you want them to contact you.
Yeah, and
Pretty easy.
I'll tell you what,
Yeah, yeah.
Arthur, for your audience too, if they contact me by email and say, "Hey, I heard you on Arthur's
Hmm.
show,"
Okay.
and they want a 20-minute conversation about leadership, there's no charge. Just let's just have a conversation. I can answer your questions if you have a situation. That's happy to help your listeners and your audience keep learning.
Okay. That'd be great. Yeah, I really appreciate it for offering in our show and for
My
our
pleasure.
audience. Yeah. So I have to say many thanks for for the time and for all the advices and for also for the books that you have written. So it is a pleasure to have your books, but also to have you in person and to talk. And I hope
Well,
it's not the last talk that we're gonna have together. So
no,
we can
let's do it again.
we can have it
Well,
again.
thank you. I'll try and be a very normal person with some extraordinary ideas for your audience.
Exactly. That is what we wanted. That's what we need.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Guys, don't forget, follow us, subscribe, share the video so more people who think that they are leaders or they want to become leaders, let us listen, let them listen to the video and contact the right person for this. Till next time, goodbye.